Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a lively talk about a fabulous new book on the work of architect and artist Anthony Poon, entitled Live, Learn, Eat. Our author, the noted architecture and design writer, Michael Webb, will be moderating our talk today. Michael knows a good deal about living, learning, and eating as he has traveled all over the world, and he actually has written a new memoir called Moving Around, A Lifetime of Wandering. I'd like to turn this over to Michael now so we can take a deep dive into the design world of Anthony Poon. Michael?
Thanks, Christine. Yes, it's true. I have spent half my life traveling abroad and writing about the best new architecture. But sometimes I make exciting discoveries in my own backyard. As a prime example, I give you Anthony Poon, whom I describe as a pragmatic perfectionist, an architect who obsesses over the details but has a firm grasp of function and value. I had the great pleasure of writing a monograph on Anthony, Live, Learn, Eat, which is being published this week. Live, Learn, Eat explores three typologies in which Poon design have excelled: houses, schools, and restaurants. If you think about it, living, learning, and eating are some of the most basic human activities, and typically they promote social interaction. We take them for granted until, as now, we are confined to our homes, unable to send our children to school, and rarely go out to dinner. I hope you will join Anthony and I as we discuss his timely and timeless designs. Anthony, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Let's talk first about houses. You created 4 modernist communities in Palm Springs, achieving high quality design at a competitive price. How were you able to slash the cost of construction?
Well, that's a great question, Michael. It's a complex answer. There are ideas that we've explored with construction techniques, as well as new innovations in materials and even electrical and plumbing systems. What it really comes down to is the design concepts that we applied. Let me back up a little bit. Our background had been in custom homes, contemporary as well as traditional, and building quite a few of those. We were challenged by a developer that moved to Los Angeles from Texas, named Andrew Adler. He became our collaborative design partner as well. And our challenge was, how do you take these ideas of these wonderful, luxurious homes and bring them to the general home buying public for about 1/4 the cost? And so that's where our thesis started. And really what it comes down to is our study of architecture, looking at what makes architecture good and highlighting that and doing away with everything else that we think becomes useless or inefficient in a nice house. As an example, we base all our designs on the most elemental qualities of good architecture: natural light, the connection of inside to outside, flexible spaces. We look at good composition and proportions, and what we do away with is a lot of the unnecessary aspects of homes that are built today, where there are long hallways and unnecessary vestibules and niches and ceiling heights that go up and down, and all the kind of things that that not only cost a lot of money, but don't really deliver a strong residential experience. This picture right here, if we can just hold it for a second, most people that see this image think this is one of those $10 million homes in the Hollywood Hills or the Beverly Hills Flats. This is a tract house. This is our interest of applying our ideas of good architecture to a mass home buying audience for a very affordable price. So that's kind of where it all starts, and we're excited to say that we've built over 200 homes of this sort and have sold them all.
You know, you've exploded a myth, which I think most people believe in, which is that an architect-designed house has to cost much more than the standard offering, and that only the rich can afford such a luxury. And bringing them together, bringing a group of houses together and creating a sense of community when I went out there with you, what impressed me the most was the way you've avoided the monotony of most suburban developments, where one cookie cutter Cape Cod follows another cookie cutter Cape Cod and so on, ad nauseam. How were you able to achieve diversity while not providing so many alternatives that, you know, the cost would go up?
For those who don't understand the background, I should just mention these are tract developments. So one neighborhood that we're working on would have upwards of 100 homes, and we designed half a dozen models for these homes, and they're repeated. And this repetition brings about an efficiency in construction and delivering homes at a good price and a fast pace. Now the trick is, as you mentioned, Michael, how do we do this without making it seem repetitive? One thing that we avoid is designing a home and just painting it a different color, or giving a different landscape, or adding superficial elements like a porch on one and a trellis on the other. We go back to what we see as good, strong architecture, and we let whatever we've designed as the interior space express itself on the exterior. And this way, these homes aren't just superficially different, they are actually different because each home has a different experience, a different layout, a different relationship to the landscape.
It seems to me that a model for this, and there aren't many examples of communities in which a single building type or style is goes all the way through. Most districts are a mixture, aren't they, of buildings of different ages, different styles, and so on. But Mar Vista, the Gregorian development of the late 1940s, housing for blue-collar workers, selling for, back then, a few $1,000s, now over $1 million, a development that is now 70 years old, is more valuable, more cherished than it ever was. When that was built, there were tremendous objections, particularly from HUD, from the housing development in Washington, that they couldn't all be modern. They had to be varied, or people wouldn't buy them. And they, you know, somebody would lose money as a result. And it seems to me that that attitude has gone all the way from Levittown in the 1950s right up to the present, that it has to be playing it safe, giving people what they know, giving them something cozy and familiar, and softening the image. And what you've done is create something that's very rigorous and I wouldn't say avant-garde, but essentially the quintessential modern house, which you can trace back to the 1920s, to Le Corbusier. Talk about the discussions you had and the response of buyers to this very different kind of option for tract housing.
The current marketplace and the developers that we've seen were actually not supportive of where we were starting this thesis. There was a lot of interest in, as you mentioned, Cape Cod, trendy aesthetic movements like California Mediterranean or Spanish colonial revival. And we are purists and we are modernists, and we really want to approach these homes very differently. We saw the marketplace. There was strong support in mid-century modern and some contemporary homes. But as we dug deeper, we realized there is a very large audience for modernism. And modernism, not just in terms of the style of the architecture, but in terms of lifestyle, in the way people want to live. The kind of modernist homes that people were seeking didn't really exist out there, not in the tract housing industry. We're talking about homes that had flexible spaces, less walls, open kitchen, dining, living room for socializing and family gatherings. It was really just an interest of ours to pursue this. We started our research really by looking at three things. We looked at the iPhone, realizing that people needed technology. We then looked at something like a Prius or a Tesla and realized people are interested in being stewards of their environment. And lastly, we studied just home decor and even furniture lines like IKEA, and they were going much sleeker, much more contemporary in their design and proportions. Putting those three things together, the contemporary design, the green approach to one's lifestyle, and the impact of technology, we then said, what kind of architecture does that support? And that was the thesis that created the kind of homes that you see that we at one point called this century modern, sort of a play on the phrase mid-century modern, but realizing we're looking to the future. And we've learned through our success in the sales of the developers, we have outsold every other developer in the region on a monthly basis combined, because we've tapped into an audience that really loves the work that we do and the kind of homes that we produce. And this is an audience of average home buyers, sophisticated city dwellers that high design sensibilities, and even world travelers who have all come to us and saying, this is the house that we've been looking for.
The qualities that mark these off for me, I'm lucky enough to live in a Richard Neutra, a classic Richard Neutra apartment. It's only 1,200 square feet, but it feels much bigger. And it's all about space and light, isn't it? As you said, those are the basics, those are the real architectural luxuries. And your houses in Palm Springs have that in abundance. You're always aware, not of the neighbors, but of the mountains. You are looking out, as you said, indoors, outdoors, you're blurring the boundary between those. But even within the house, even on days where it's too hot to go outside and you have to have the windows closed, you've got this extraordinary feeling of amplitude. Talk about how you were able to build that into a house where you had pared everything down to essentials and forgone all the, quote, unnecessary luxuries that, you know, are typical of custom houses, to be able to create the things that really mattered and to have that relationship between indoor and outdoor and within the house itself.
I like to think of a phrase that we've used, which is a house without walls. Of course, there are walls that hold up the roof and walls that provide privacy in bedrooms and bathrooms. But in the way a homeowner or a family would move through the house, that's where we really look to remove a lot of the divisions. Traditional homes are very compartmentalized. I think of the homes that I grew up in where the kitchen is a separate room, 4 walls. Then there's a formal dining room. And there's, of course, that family room and the notorious living room that no one ever uses. My parents' home has a living room, and I don't think anyone's ever been in it, but it's staged to entertain guests. And of course, as we all know, when you entertain, guests come and usually hang out in the family room or the kitchen. So we said, let's take away the separation and let's connect a lot of these homes and really, as I mentioned, just work with good proportions and good space making and good natural light. Now, taking away the walls also means the typical wall that would connect you to the outside. In many of our homes, that wall that separates you from your backyard and the view of the mountains and the sunlight, that wall is an entire set of glass sliding doors. And when you move outside, that leads you to a covered outdoor area. So for example, if you had a 1,000 square foot living room and outside of those sliding glass doors, you had another 1,000 square feet of covered space, but it is outside, all of a sudden your living area becomes 2,000 square feet. And that's how we're able to really give a very expansive feel of living and a very luxurious lifestyle on a modest budget.
Final point, the houses are the product of 2 years of research and development, aren't they? And you did some very basic, some very innovative moves in terms of the roof, in terms of a wall in some of the houses that would contain all the services and essentially be a kind of spine running through, supporting the house the way the spine supports the body. You talk a little about the innovations.
Very true. We spent just a little under 2 years on just research while the developing team was shopping for the right locations and making deals and finding the right properties. We were playing with different prototypes, looking at different ways of framing roofs and ceilings and different mechanical systems. The example you brought up, we call it the core wall, which is very simple. In this house floor plan, there's a single wall that runs down the middle. On one side is the public, on the other side is the private. The private are the bedrooms, the bathrooms, the study. On the public is the living room, the kitchen, the dining room, and the entry. This single core wall contains all the infrastructure for the house. It contains the electrical needs, the mechanical needs, the green aspects, security, audiovisual, technology, and being that it runs right through the core of the house, it is, as you said, a spine, and makes it very efficient then to branch off and connect and support all the other rooms, rather than what you see in a typical house where ductwork is spread out and sprawling all over through the ceilings, plumbing's going all over the floors, and electrical. That again is a very inefficient use of the building materials and the necessary infrastructure that we need for homes today.
Let's move on to school design, which is another field in which you've excelled. Before setting up your own practice in 2001, you worked on large-scale projects for other firms. How did that feed into your institutional work?
True. Before launching our business here, many of us worked for some very prestigious large companies, and we worked on institutional projects, performing arts, cultural buildings, K through 12, and higher education. That experience really taught us to understand the logistics and the mechanics of executing these projects, bringing them to fruition on budget, on schedule, which is a priority for a lot of these Board of Education and corporate boards and fundraisers. So we brought with that from those large company experiences our skill set to actually deliver a project. We add to that now the design boutique quality of our studio and give our clients the kind of experimental and more thoughtful process, but backed by the kind of leverage and knowledge that we gain from working with some of these large firms.
In parallel to your own practice, you and a colleague master planned an entire school district in Illinois, enhancing or rebuilding 18 different schools. That was an early experience. What did you learn from that? Our
approach to educational projects really focuses on the teachers. A lot of projects start with just the kind of utilitarian program of how many classrooms, how many students in a classroom, the square footage, how much storage did you get. We said, let's look more closely at the educational curriculum of each of these schools and see how we can represent that in our architecture. We think of a school design as an open textbook. We believe that every aspect of the building can teach. And we look to the teachers and say, how do you teach? And what can we do to support the way the students learn? So for example, if this is a curriculum in a school, let's say an elementary school that really supports the idea of co-teaching, we would design the classrooms in which some of these walls are movable partitions, and 2 or 3 classrooms can come together and learn as a group. We've used even details in the floor pattern, for example, to really introduce students to more lessons. As you approach the math wing in a high school, the floor patterns would show mathematical notations. As you walk down the hallway to the music room, in one example of a school in Chicago, the floor pattern actually displays the score of the high school fight song, which allows students to walk, skip on the notes, and actually hum them as they walk into the music room. So it's really looking at every opportunity in the architecture to say, what are we teaching? How can these students learn, not just from their teachers, but from the actual building itself?
Which again introduces some very basic issues of what makes a school building function well for both the students and the teachers who have different needs, and perhaps, you know, parents who come to visit. And, you know, this must change from one age group to another, but there's always that complexity of interaction between different people, different groups, different students. Talk, if you will, about that, about, as it were, what is at the core of designing a school?
Well, it's interesting, and it's an ongoing topic, obviously, today, as we're talking with some of our educational clients to look at what is the future of schools. Of course, there's the idea of the proportion of the classroom and the size and the number of students that would allow for certain physical distancing. But, you know, what it's really looking back at for us is just the core ways that a school functions. For example, fresh air has always been relevant in the quality of a classroom. Over the years, with air conditioning and mechanical systems and heating, we've conditioned these classrooms so tightly that the idea of fresh air, the idea that a student can go and open up a window and let the air in, doesn't seem to be an option these days. With where schools are now, the idea of fresh air, as is being studied by even our office clients and our restaurant clients, is a critical aspect. So we're designing schools to allow windows to actually open. Additionally, just the way students move through a campus, whether it's higher education or a high school campus, is critical to studying students and their life at school. The school is the existence that students have primarily as their first entry into being a civil servant and being a part of a community outside of their home. As they move through a school, we want to really map this out, not just in terms of the function and making sure they can all get off the bus and not get overcrowded at the front door and getting to the classroom, but really study where they can socialize, where they can form their own network of communities. And as we look at the pandemic now, even look at traffic patterns and ensuring where it needs to be perhaps one way, where you go in one room and out a different door, and really think more thoughtfully about how people move through schools, whether it's a preschool or middle school or college campus, and think of it almost like a mini city. And we're sort of urban planning how people meet, how they react, how they respond to each other, or when necessary, just move along as efficiently as possible.
I imagine that most schools are, most school boards are working on a very tight budget, and that every cost is a critical factor. But unlike houses, schools get a lot of hardware, a lot of hard knocks. I mean, students can be very destructive, kind of aggressive. And how do you balance those two things? You can't use cheap materials or finishes because they're just going to look horrible in no time at all. Yet you have to stay within the set budget. So how did you deal with that?
Well, that's a good question. Our educational clients are both public school districts as well as independent schools. And of course, there's a different way money is spent. You mentioned our number of schools in the Chicago area. That was for a single school district, publicly funded. The budgets were very reduced, very economical. And you're right, Michael, on another point. If you ask anyone who runs a school, they'll say it's one of the most abused buildings. I think the kids haven't yet learned to care for their environments. The buildings do need to be durable, affordable, and also easy to maintain over the next 5 years, 10 years, even 50 years. It's really about just how you use materials and where you apply them. With one of our projects, for example, we used concrete block for the walls. Very durable, indestructible actually, and extremely affordable. But if you just use block, that kind of gray concrete block as it comes off the shelf, it's gonna look like a prison. So we use the different colors, the different patterns that are available to us, different finishes from smooth and ground face to split face, and be able to really create patterns. And in one case, we even replicated the panoramic view in the mountains and the blue sky by creating a pattern within the block. To soften this concrete block, we added redwood trim, but we added it up high, which then allows it to really age naturally and work against anyone who's looking to carve or vandalize. And the simplest thing we've learned to prevent a school from getting abused too much is actually landscape. You know, if you grow some vines up on a wall, a person cannot graffiti that wall. No one's going to spray paint. So there's some very simple lessons that we've learned that beautify a school, that fit very easily into a school construction budget, particularly the lower budgets of public schools, as well as enhance and beautify the campus.
From what you told me, smaller firms like yours are getting squeezed out of this market by large firms, the same in the healthcare industry, that specialize and in effect are grinding out very similar solutions for very different problems. Talk about the need for fresh thinking and what you can bring to a typology like this that a big firm is probably not going to.
The word expertise or experience is something that a lot of clients seek. As we pursue projects, a client might ask to see the last 5 completed high schools in the last 5 years, which is actually a difficult statistic to meet as a boutique design studio, maybe easier to meet if you're a 500-person architectural corporation. But clients have to also be careful that experience for some companies may fall into the trap of a cookie cutter solution, that they too quickly can go to their library of past design solutions and replicate them for new clients. And that's kind of the opposite of the way we approach things. And we want all our schools, actually all our projects, to be as customized to our clients as possible, to really understand each of our clients, what the mission statement is, to tell their story, to talk about their successes and even maybe some of their failures and battle scars and lessons learned, and make a project that is unique to every institution and every educational project that we're working with. So that may put us on a smaller pool of candidates for these projects, but we look for our clients that understand the value of that. If they are looking for a big firm that brings together an architecture and engineering team to crank out a big school, one that they've seen often and repeated often in the district, we're probably not the right fit. We're the ones that want to really learn who you are and who your students are and how your teachers want to teach. And we want to create something unique to you.
And how do you deal with the issue of scale when you've got a K through 12 school and you're dealing with very little kids and very big and maybe very aggressive teenagers, to, as it were, level the playing field between them and create an appropriate environment for children of very different ages?
It is back to what I was saying about really understanding who our client is. Educational clients span the entire scale of our users and visitors. As you said, from preschool kids to adult learners, from college, university students to high school kids. It's really understanding that, and scale often has a lot to do with just understanding the measurements that might be, again, too cookie cutter, too standard, that someone might think the 30-inch desk height is the standard, and that's what every internet will tell you to use. But if we're working with a K through 3rd grade, these students are much smaller. This is no different than designing a house for a tall couple with tall children, or as Frank Lloyd Wright did. He was a shorter man and had a different sense of scale as he designed for his clients.
Right, let's finally go to restaurants. You've designed more than 50 varied examples, working on both generous and frugal budgets. And like schools, they have to accommodate all their users in the kitchen and dining area and in between. How do you choreograph those movements?
That's a good word, Michael, choreography. These restaurants, those of all of us who go to restaurants, spend time in the dining room or at the bar, at the outdoor patio. These are wonderful spaces. Behind those walls is a tremendous amount of activity. This image here is the restaurant downtown LA called Chaya, and it's a large restaurant. Roughly 50% of the floor plan goes to back of house. It's almost like a theater where the diner sees the play and sees what's presented to them at the front of stage and not explicitly aware of all the activity that's going behind stage, all the people running around. In the case of these restaurants, there's up to 100 people on a cook line with 30 cooktops, waiters running around, dishwashers, circulation moving everywhere while trying to present the most elegant dining experience for the user, and choreographing it almost like a football coach. We sit with this green board and drawing X's and O's and chalkboard lines to really understand how a waiter needs to move from spot A to spot B and not conflict with a diner coming in for their nice anniversary dinner. So there's quite a lot of pre-planning before we even get to the design and choosing the right type of light fixtures and the right type of materials.
And it seems to me a lot of this is both physical, but also intangible. Restaurants define themselves by their cuisine, their service, and the atmosphere, the feel of the place, the acoustics, the way that everybody dresses. You know, there are places that are super casual, others that are more formal. How do you bring all those things together in a seamless whole?
We offer to our restaurants what we call comprehensive design. It starts first with looking at the type of cuisine, as you mentioned, the type of food and the service model that this restaurant client presents. It might be the handcrafted sandwiches of our client Mendocino Farms. It might be the dumplings, the world famous dumplings of the Chinese restaurant Dentai. And we look to how those ideas can be represented in the architecture. But for us, space making goes far beyond architecture. For a lot of our restaurant clients, we have designed the architecture and the interior design, of course, bringing in both landscape ideas, lighting design. We custom design furniture. We also get into the graphic design, the branding, the website, and for some clients, even evaluating the uniform design and the music. And I want to kind of talk about that for a second. Architecture is the experience that you feel as you walk into a restaurant. I'm a musician and feel that music is part of that architecture. I don't know how many times I've been in a restaurant and the general manager has plopped in his iPod and it's just playing his playlist, and it's an irrelevant selection of music to the style and the flavor of the dining room. And we feel that music also supports the ideas of the chef and the owners. And it's the same way that some might say, let's look at the way sunlight moves through the day, through the windows, as it goes through the restaurant. We'd say the same thing. What kind of music should be playing at lunchtime when the professionals arrive? What kind of music should be playing at happy hour when everyone's celebrating the end of an exhausting workday? What's the appropriate music for fine dining? And as the crowd winds down for late night drinks or dessert, what's the kind of music for that? We think of that the same way we think of lighting design, same way we pick the fabric for a banquette or the wood stain for the tabletops. It's a comprehensive, integrated experience. And just one last aspect, Michael, you mentioned acoustics. That plays into the quality of the experience as well. I'm sure many of you have been to restaurants where you sit 3 feet from your company and you can barely hear their voice because there's such a loud ringing in the restaurant, or maybe you can hear someone screaming in the other corner. You finally leave the restaurant after 90 minutes realizing your throat is sore from having yelled so much, and your rings are ringing, your ears are ringing from all the reverberation. Part of the quality of the architecture is not just what it looks like, but what it feels like to all the senses. For music, that's the ears, and also we have to bring our technical experience with acoustic engineering and know how to control sound and give a wonderful environment that is visual, that is physical, that is oral for the way you hear, and of course, for the reason why you're there, which is for the food.
You know, it's so funny you mentioned acoustics. My friend Frances Anderson, who did a program on the reopening of restaurants on her DNA program, spoke of the joy of eating outdoors, not only because they're in the fresh air, but you don't have to raise your voice to be heard having a conversation, where inside it's become a kind of whose voice is the loudest. And
Correct.
somehow the volume is turned up to maximum. And I hate that. I can't wait to get out of that closed environment, COVID or no COVID, even before COVID, in order to have a peaceful atmosphere. So do you find that restaurateurs are willing to treat that seriously? I've been told that they actually welcome noise because people drink more and eat faster, and therefore the turnover and the profit is greater. And that there is actually a kind of contrary movement against quiet acoustics of the kind that existed when there were carpets and upholstery and curtains and all the old-fashioned things that we remember from long ago in restaurants, where now it's all hard, reverberant surfaces.
It's an interesting topic. All of our restaurateur clients want their spaces to have a certain buzz. There needs to be a kind of energy sounding through the room. No one wants to walk into a restaurant and feel like it's the university library where it's so quiet. People go to restaurants, and it's even more apparent today, for the social contact, to be amongst a community of people. Similarly to the difference between watching a movie at home on Netflix and going to a theater, which a large group. These are people you might not even know, but there's a certain social experience there. So at a restaurant, there does need to be a buzz, and then most restaurants will want music to be playing and a certain hum of voices, but it's really controlling that and even playing the restaurant as if it's an instrument, as a musician, as you tune it to be the right feel. Some restaurants want a certain hyper energy during happy hour, that there's loud music and there's a pulse going, and other restaurants really want that elegant fine dining experience. So we start by looking to the restaurateur and asking them, what is that experience? Then we tune it to what they are going for as an identity, an acoustic identity. And just as a quick lesson, we ask our clients what we call the ABC of acoustic design. A meaning absorb, B meaning block, and C meaning cover. So we choose materials to absorb what we want to absorb. You mentioned carpet. That's a great material, but of course very hard to maintain. But there are so many materials that can be used to absorb sound. Block is really blocking out the sounds no one wants to hear. No one wants to hear voices in the kitchen washing dishes. So we want to block that, as well as block the sounds from the back of house and maybe the restrooms or the cars outside. Cover is really thinking about what sounds you want to cover and what you want to let in. If you're on an outside patio on a busy street, you may want to cover the sound of cars honking, but you do want to pick up some of the energy of the city. You can cover that with music. You can cover that with a fountain. You can cover that in so many different ways. So just through simple lessons like that, we really understand who our clients are, work through their goals, and be able to capture that in the architecture, the interior design, and all the other aspects that we work on with the client.
Talk about a couple of specific examples. One of your star clients in Southern California was Dentai, whom you mentioned earlier, a global chain that grew from its original place in Taiwan. Why do people line up for hours to get in, and what do they expect when they get in?
Well, it's quite a challenge when people have waited several hours, even as much as 5 hours in the San Francisco location to get in. They were expecting a lot, not just from the quality of the food, but also the experience, the service, and of course, the interior design and the architecture. We're proud to be the architect for that restaurant business that even the New York Times have claimed one of the top 10 restaurants in the world. There were two main themes. The first, they're famous for their dumplings, of which every day they hand make roughly between 50 to 100,000 dumplings per day, folded carefully by hand. Each fold represents a different artistic style and what the content is, and releases flavors and aromas as it goes into your mouth. We figured that that really is something so unique to the restaurant that in the restaurants we've designed for them, we featured that as an elemental theatrical element, that there is a glass box that shows and presents all the dumpling makers as they're making them one by hand, and the entire restaurant centers around this one activity. People come, even people not dining, just to sit there and watch this being made, this artistry being made in real time. The second aspect was this is a Chinese restaurant, a traditional Chinese restaurant with cuisine, with recipes and ideas from quite a legacy of family recipes. But this restaurant did not, in our mind, want to be a Chinese theme park, a Chinese Disneyland. The clients were not interested in golden dragons and red silk cloths and phoenixes and Chinese calligraphy. So we had to find ways to reinterpret that, both in aesthetics and in technique. So for example, we used the idea of the wood screen, the traditional Asian privacy screen, and studied all the traditional patterns and recreated that and modernized it and gave it a more contemporary graphic feel. We then took sheets of walnut plywood and water jet cut the patterns into that, which was reminiscent of the wood panels of history, but a new technique. We've even laser cut rusted steel panels and use that as screens. So it's a way of looking at new construction techniques, traditional ideas, blending and respecting heritage and an Asian history, but also looking to the future and bringing a very popular restaurant into today and into the community of international and local restaurant visitors.
Dentai folk can afford to do it in a very sophisticated way, but a lot of restaurateurs are really working on a shoestring and don't want to burden themselves with a huge overhead before they prove themselves. Even some of the most important restaurants in LA started in a very modest way. And when your clients have a tight budget, how do you make the best use of that?
Well, you're correct. Most of our restaurant clients aren't always the big, famous Michelin rated ones. There are a number of our clients that have been small businesses or maybe even their first restaurant, as they have gathered up and cobbled together through family and friends their first budget to launch a restaurant. We have to respect that. We have to know there are limits, and we really have to sort of pick our battles and decide where best to spend money and where to be very thoughtful and efficient in how you use dollars. It also has to do with the kind of aesthetic approach. Mendocino Farms was one of our early clients, of which we've done several of the restaurants, and achieved a wonderful aesthetic through their interest in handcrafted sandwiches, as well as a kind of gastropub feel. That gave us the opportunity to really explore materials in a new way, to use industrial components, or maybe components right off the shelf, plumbing parts being used to make the legs of a tabletop that is adjustable in height, using chalkboard paint on the walls and chalk to have murals be put on, and having that be the backdrop instead of retaining maybe a high-end artist to do an installation. For the location that we did near the Grove, the chandeliers are made of a couple of 60-watt light bulbs wrapped with a chicken wire right off the shelf of Home Depot, and each chandelier has 1,500 wooden clothespins. And it just creates a beautiful lighting effect, affordable, and really captures the aesthetic of that restaurant owner.
Anthony, we've discussed the three themes of the monograph, but you have many other talents. You're a classically trained pianist and accomplished artist, and your 8-person firm has tackled many other commissions, from sacred spaces to graphics, furniture, and lighting design. How have you been able to achieve so much with such modest resources?
The idea goes back to music. I like to think of the metaphor here of the jazz ensemble, or maybe the small orchestra, that we're all very highly trained and intelligent designers. And we all bring different unique talents, whether it's interior design or lighting design or construction expertise, maybe a graphic eye. Everyone here has multiple interests outside of purely the architecture field, from photography to writing to studying history. We even had a literal rocket scientist on our staff for 4 or 5 years who also studied architecture at UCLA. We put together all these talents and try our best to work organically. This is not a studio in which I come up with a sketch and look to everyone to merely implement it and make it a signature of my ego. This is a collaboration of everyone putting ideas together, bouncing off each other, similar to some of the ideas that jazz music represents: improvisation, spontaneity. How can ideas bounce back and forth through a fast 30-minute design debate as we launch a new project? I think it's that kind of freedom in thinking that allows a smaller team to really set forth some pretty big ideas.
What are your ambitions for the next decade once we're through the pandemic?
We're hoping to continue our design ambitions on a larger scale. We already work on projects from schools to restaurants, even sacred projects, churches, and mixed use and cultural projects. And it's all for a sense of community, neighborhood, equality, and equity. We're looking to move our projects into a larger scale, take some of our cultural projects of visitor centers and art galleries into a larger museum scale, some of our ideas of the performing arts in the larger performing arts centers, some of our educational projects into larger campuses, and just continue what we do, but even for a broader civic audience, and touch as many people as we can, as many participants of the public that want to engage good architecture and design. That's what we're here for.
While we've been talking, viewers have been sending in questions, and an architect in Paris wants to congratulate you on winning a national AIA award for one of your Palm Springs communities. Are any of those homes still on the market?
Unfortunately, right now, no. And I guess that's unfortunate, but also a bragging point in that we have built 230 of these homes in 3 different communities in and around Palm Springs, and they all sold out. Some of them selling out even before we started construction. Really is a box to be nicely checked off to say that the ideas that we started really found an audience. So now we are talking with other developers of a similar program. Good architecture, modern architecture on a very affordable budget. We've met with developers looking in the Mount Washington area of Los Angeles. I've met with the mayor of Culver City to look how some of these ideas can help with the housing crisis. And even as far as Texas, Las Vegas, and Arizona, different developers have come to us to brainstorm and see, and not just about how do you produce homes cheaply, it's more about how do you produce extraordinary, luxurious homes on an affordable budget and make it attainable to every home buyer out there in the country.
Interestingly, the next question is from Culver City. What do you think the future of school design will be if COVID or other viruses stick around? How do you balance social distancing and collective interaction?
Touches on a little bit of what I was mentioning classrooms will have to be created as flexible spaces. We know that the pandemic will have a conclusion at some point in the near future. We are aware that there may be another one. And we have to start designing intelligently, as I mentioned, fresh air, traffic patterns as you lay out, whether it's a campus or a small school. We've already looked to technology as a strong leverage against all the challenges at a time like this. We have hands-free technology for opening and closing doors. We've already put them in some restaurants, hands-free in the bathrooms, soap dispensers, water faucets, all being hands-free. There's a lot of exploration right now into antibacterial coatings for materials, as well as antibacterial content in the materials. We're eager to see where this all goes. Just the study of mechanical systems have become a priority. No longer just saying how do we air condition and how do we heat, but the quality of the indoor air environment is very important. There are so many items that we need to look at. And we're blessed in California to have the climate that allows us to create outdoor classrooms, which we've done now for Berkeley Hall School up on Mulholland, to take their STEM lab and allow that room to just open to the outside and double their square footage. This may not always be possible in every situation because of climate, but there are just so many new ideas that we have to take a lot more seriously that we took for granted in the past.
The last question we have time for is very related to that. How do you see restaurant design evolving after the prolonged shutdown, assuming there are still restaurants in business?
It is a challenge for our restaurant clients. They're being asked not just to survive financially for another month or two, but possibly 6 months, possibly 12 months. Some of these small businesses have to be very creative. We're looking at, obviously, outdoor patios, but for us, it's not just throwing the doors and putting some chairs out. We want to create these with the same attention as the dining rooms that we've created in the past. That dining experience, indoor or outdoor, needs to be superb and needs to be very well thought of. As we build more booths and partitions, we want to encourage our clients to not just go to Home Depot and put up a piece of plexiglass. That does work in some cases. To us, it's a Band-Aid, and we need to really think what's going to be a beautiful way and an elegant and sophisticated way of creating more division and a little bit more separation, but at the same time, let you know that you're dining in a community of other diners. Technology, again, is already playing a part in this. A lot of our restaurants are already doing away with menus that you can order completely on an iPad or an iPhone, and the waiter's already there with your order and serving your table, and not having to fuss with maybe worrying about touching a menu or other objects on the table. So through technology, through the qualities of what makes a restaurant great to begin with, environment, materials, music, acoustics, all those things still apply whether it's an outdoor patio or whatever the new form of the restaurants are in the future.
Anthony, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
And I hope we'll be able to do this face-to-face very soon, maybe over some more of those delicious dumplings at Dentai Fong. Thanks to everyone who's been watching, and I hope you'll check out Anthony's website, poondesign.com, and purchase your copy of Live, Learn, Eat. The publisher is offering a 20% discount if you order direct from them, so go to oroeditions.com. Enjoy and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.